Welcome, everybody. Chris Neidl here. Thanks so much for joining. This is CDR, our latest installment. This is CDR for new joiners, is Open Air's regular, mostly weekly webinar series, sort of our flagship webinar series in which we engage with a range of different innovators and entrepreneurs and creators in the carbon dioxide removal space as a way of giving our audience a picture of how carbon dioxide removal is evolving in the real world. Tank, who's our co-host, you'll see in a second, is going to drop some links about future programming where you can register for upcoming episodes of This is CDR. So today, really pleased, as you'll hear from Leila Conners in just a moment. She's our guest today, a friend and collaborator with an incredibly cool and important film, Legion 44. And we'll speak to Leila in just a moment. But just to begin, just a little bit of background if you're new to the show or you're new to Open Air. I'll give you a little bit of a background on that. So Open Air is a all volunteer-led carbon dioxide removal advocacy network. We have members all over the world, and our job basically is to not only raise awareness and support for carbon dioxide removal, but to actively work on multiple different fronts to accelerate its progress. And our community is primarily lots of Zooms that our members jump on to work on different projects during any given week. But our primary platform where our community really interacts with each other and has conversations is on Discord. Tank is going to go ahead and drop a link if you are interested in joining that. As I mentioned, we have multiple fronts that our members are active on. And advocacy, very involved in driving new legislation and policy proposals around carbon dioxide removal, particularly on the state and subnational level here in the United States, but also have projects in other parts of the world. That really just depends on where our members are and what they want to do. We have some great R&D or research and development projects that we have a community of makers that work on a variety of different projects that are open source or citizen science projects. I've talked about those in prior episodes. Education, a range of different sort of content that we create for different audiences just to raise awareness and understanding of what carbon dioxide removal is. This is CDR being a prime example of that, as well as enterprise. We have some projects that we work on that are directly trying to support particular businesses or business ideas to see if we can add support to make those viable in the real world. And we've got a really cool project that will be an upcoming guest in January when we get back from the holiday that fits within this domain. So I'll say more about that at the end of the call. Just a couple of examples here to illustrate. Each week, I like to kind of highlight a particular mission that we're working on. One that's really interesting, that's really kind of taken off, is called Blockheads. And this is a group of activists within Open Air, mostly in the United States, that are advocating for low carbon concrete, but specifically for the utilization of concrete as a medium for storing carbon, which is one of the exciting things about it. Open Air has been involved in this area for a number of years, and now we've got a very active grassroots community of people that are trying to advance it at the municipal and state level. And then another one, which we had a couple of weeks ago, where our guest is the Carbon Removal Challenge. And this is a really just amazing, one of my favorite projects that Open Air does, that is a competition for university teams, where once a year we select, through a competitively selected technical review process, 5, 6, 7 teams from around the world that have submitted designs and prototype outlines for carbon dioxide removal technologies. And then we convene in New York City. This year it will be in May, where they're awarded, they present their projects. And it's just been an amazing experience. So if you've tuned in a couple weeks ago, you know about it. If not, you can go to Open Air's YouTube channel, our CDR, this is CDR playlist, and take a look at that. And Tank will also drop the link to the Carbon Removal Challenge on the Open Air website. All right. So with that, I'm going to hand off to my good friend and colleague, Tank, who's going to introduce Leila Conners today, who's speaking about Legion 44, the first feature-length documentary about carbon removal that debuted during Climate Week just a couple months back in New York City. and is going to be viewed increasingly around the world, and hopefully with the help of some of the folks who are joining us today, which we'll talk about for the second part of the conversation. So with that, I will go ahead and hand over to Tank, who can join me. And I'll go to this mode. Hey, Tank, how you doing?
Good. All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Tank. I am a volunteer, open air volunteer based in Taiwan, and I work on communications. Today, we're very excited to have Leila on the show to talk about Legion 44. But before, some housekeeping notes before we begin. Our format will be a short presentation, followed by a few prepared questions, and then moderated audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use the StreamYard chat box so that we can better address during the Q&A session. And also, this event is being recorded, so we will send the video link to everyone who register and also post to Open Air's website and YouTube channels. Okay, now I will introduce today's guest, Leila Conners. Leila is a seasoned media producer with over 25 years of experience in creating inspiring stories that support and sustain civil society. In 1996, she founded Tree Media Group, a production company dedicated to creating inspiring, advocacy-focused media in collaboration with scientists, institutions, and communities worldwide. With a background in international politics and economics, she has directed acclaimed films such as The 11th Hour, HBO's Ice on Fire, and most recently, and relevant to today's conversation, Legion 44. Leila has collaborated with scientists, institutions like NASA and Harvard, and governments worldwide, and her work has been featured in major publications, including the International Herald Tribune and Wire magazine. Passionate about community-driven action and innovation, Leila brings a wealth of expertise and a commitment to positive change to our panel discussion today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris and Tank, for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Just a couple of addenda to the format. Normally, we have a presentation that we do as part of our standard format, but today we're really going to be having a conversation, really kind of getting into a range of the different sort of details and the origins of the film. We are going to talk about, where Leila, we'll start with her just very illustrious and interesting career that led her to this film, the actual film itself, its production, what was learned, and then we will reserve the later part of the call to kind of talk about what you all can do to help not only go see it, but help other people see it. And there's some sort of interesting ideas that are being advanced for that. What you can also do is please do throw your questions or comments in as we go. And rather than reserving just the last part of the conversation for audience questions, we'll go ahead and fold them in as they come. So Tank, if you see something pop up, let me know, and you can pop up on screen and ask the question. So Leila, how you doing? Good to see you.
I'm good. Winter's upon us, but yes, happy.
Yeah. So full disclosure, Leila and I are CDR buddies. We've been connected for a while and have worked on some projects together. And I am a active booster of the film and Leila's work. And so I was really pleased that you accepted the invitation to talk right at this moment, because it's a key moment for the film itself. But as we always do with this CDR, we want to sort of really kind of peel back the thing, whether it's a company or a technology, a film, and show that there's a living, breathing human behind it that has motivations and that has a history that is actively making this thing happen. So, Leila, I was wondering if you could just give us a bit of background on how you made it to Legion 44, and a little bit about your prior work as a filmmaker and as a policy actor.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I see that you had mentioned the scenic route to the answer. So happy to do that. And thank you for giving me the forum to really lay out my approach and why I do what I do. And I think it'll help a lot of people understand. Basically, as you said, my background's in international politics and economics. I was, at Berkeley and also went abroad. Studied and have a pretty global perspective. I'm also half American, half European and Egyptian. So have been traveling most of my life to see family. And so I have a pretty global perspective. And so when I was studying international politics, I was especially intrigued by Joseph Nye and his work. He's at Harvard around soft power. And the idea that ideas as much as military make an impact. And when the wall fell and the Cold War, unfolded. The end of the Cold War unfolded, and through my work in think tanks and stuff, I got to know Mikhail Gorbachev. He did say that it was Ted Turner, CNN, and the Goodwill Games that really brought the idea of the West across the borders of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union, and that was a super powerful force that sort of ended that whole structure. And so I was always fascinated by ideas and how ideas help unify the world. And I just started a Substack actually called Into the Woods, because I'm a city person that now lives in the woods, and I have a whole new perspective and time to write about things. And things that I'm always interested in is what motivates people towards peace. How do we make global peace? And also, how do we create a world we all can live in? And so Gorbachev, when he left power, also talked about climate change. And so way back in the first Rio round, I was introduced to the concept of climate change. So, and mostly, I don't like that word anymore. It's really living inside the carbon cycle. And this is why I love CDR, because for all of the polarization around the subject, really what we're learning as a human collective is how do we live inside the carbon cycle? And that includes CDR. And up until recently, well, I came across Klaus Lackner's work in 2002, the idea of the mechanical tree and direct air capture. But we always knew also that nature does it, obviously. 100 up, 100 down, gigatons of carbon cycling. Humans are digging up deep carbon pools and throwing it up into the sky. So destabilizing that cycle. So how do we live inside it? And so when we came across the mechanical tree, that stuck with me in 2002. So that's basically a very brief sort of wander to answer your question, how I arrived at CDR is I've always looked at pathways on how do we live here on this earth as a collective of human beings. What are the structures of peace? How do we avoid conflict? And how do we obviously create a biosphere, or not create but live inside the biosphere in a way that we don't destabilize it so that, our lives aren't threatened. So that's basically how I arrived at it, and came across CDR very, very early.
Me too. I didn't know that we had the mutual spark from Klaus Lackner, though. It's not surprising. I just a couple of years after you, when I was very early in my career, early in my solar career, where I spent 15 years, I saw him speak at Columbia in my mid-20s, and it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. And I had an intuitive sense. I'm like, I'm probably going to be doing something with that at some point. And here I am.
Mm-hmm.
So a quick question, just a little bit more, I'm a policy guy as well. I studied public policy. I'm an activist. I write policy, stuff like that. You have a policy background, particularly in international relations, but yet you've gone down this really interesting road of producing a bunch of great films, not limited to Legion 44. I was wondering if you just kind of at a high level talk about, like, as a policy activist or advocate who's fundamentally focused on change making, what is the unique role of documentary film in advancing such changes that kind of led you down that direction?
Well, it's back to Joe Nye. When I founded Tree Media in 1996, I actually posted an essay by Joe Nye on my first web page, which was at the time of Mosaic, when Mark Andreessen actually invented, Mosaic. And, it was basically the idea that, prior to the internet, right? I was on Echo NYC in the Well. I was in the Unix shell, hosting conversations. Remember, we were really all siloed inside television news and newspapers and radio, right? It was very difficult outside of, let's say, big institutions to get the ideas that, let's just say, was circulating globally. And when I was at my think tank, I had the privilege of listening to what they call the global elites talk about war, peace, all of the economic flows. So former presidents, former prime ministers or foreign ministers or whatever. And I never saw what they were talking actually reflected in what we call the media sphere. It was just not there. And so when the internet was born, I founded Tree Media with this high-minded ideal that now that the internet is born, oh my God, it's all horizontal. It's all, everyone has access to freedom of speech. We can all start sharing these ideas globally, right? And for a while that actually happened. There was something called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I don't know if everyone remembered Sir Dyson and like John Perry Barlow. And it was all this heady days of the new way of communicating. And the only problem was it couldn't hold film. It couldn't really hold what we're doing now, right? So we were a little early on the content side. So we went back to film. And so basically, film, I think we're actually now in 2024, finally at the moment where film as in theatrical viewing might be finally a thing that, like, kind of when you go to a museum and look at an oil painting, it's one of those things that no one really is doing anymore the way we used to do it. It's not like people are going and watching movies on a Tuesday afternoon in a theater. That said, impact media or impact film or documentary films, which, by the way, documentaries now have a lot of different categories. There's impact docs, essay docs, investigative docs, that kind of thing, narrated docs. So it's kind of a weird name that probably should evolve itself as well, because we've firmly sat in the impact/essay doc section, which is we have a point of view and we need to talk about it. And you asked, how does this help the world? I mean, humans use stories as a way to communicate ideas and evolve ourselves. That's how we do it. And like I said early in the day, there were a lot of barriers to entry for a lot of new ideas. Now we live in the time of everyone can speak. There's algorithms that suppress certain ideas. We know that to be true now. Film of this kind is an aggregative force. So what it does is it allows us to have the event we had in New York. It allows us to bring people together to experience something together and then have a party afterwards, talk about it, have maybe, these kinds of films are shown in front of conferences where people can discuss it later. It gets everyone on a sort of direction all at the same time. And so I can go on and on about the different uses of this kind of medium, but it sounds contradictory, but it's not. It's basically, we have the internet. I think we're moving away from theatrical, but we can now turn theatrical events into something more substantive where you can make it as sort of an aggregating tool to then, get people to, engage in something. Finally, I will say, over the 25 years I've been doing this, we've actually have outcomes from this kind of activity. So we know it works and it's not, in a sense, manipulative, and we can talk about it later. We don't have a single usual point of view in the sense we include a lot of voices at once, so you see the conversation from multiple points of view, right? So
Yeah, that is the changing way in which this kind of content can be deployed and, asynchronously across all sorts of different platforms. And you've kind of seen that happen. I mean, you entered a really interesting time and saw that change before your very eyes.
Yeah.
We are going to show the teaser or trailer for the film, which is about 2 minutes long, in just a moment or two. And I'll have you set that up for us, Leila. We'll really talk about the film proper. But one other one too, and I'm kind of a bit of a leading question because I think I understand your point of view on this. There's all sorts of things that, you made the 11th hour, Ice on Fire, climate has been, central to your work for a long time. But even in 2024, there's many things that you could raise the alarm and everything you just suggested about the role of documentary films, including decarbonization, which is still, we're behind on. But you said why you think carbon removal is interesting, but I have a sense as an activist, you felt like there's maybe a lot of work to be done about changing minds, even within the environmental community itself. So I'm curious, with all the options that you had, like what is it you think about, like carbon removal is the thing that really sunk your teeth into to really kind of make a big part of your life?
Well, besides the fact that I was fascinated by the mechanical tree, and in Ice on Fire, that's when Christoph and Jan, came out with their version of DAC. And that was so exciting because I thought it was still in lab stage. So that was nice. Mm-hmm. I think what's going on with CDR is that and the other thing that we do at Tree Media is we sort of look at what's actually happening, right? And so what happened is there's this spontaneous eruption of projects in the space ever since the pandemic. So, maybe a lot of this was happening prior to the pandemic. It was almost like I dropped Ice on Fire, pandemic happened 6 months later, we go through the pandemic, come out, and there's like hundreds of CDR companies. So there's that. But it's also the fact that you can't, and for this is personal, you can't talk to the world about their lives are going to be severely and negatively impacted by a phenomenon and not expect people to come up with solutions, right? And so a lot of people who don't like CDR are like, well, wait, we only need to do renewable energy. We only need to decarbonize the economy, which is, by the way, yes, let's go ahead and do that. I've been talking about that for 25 years. However, things are not that much better. So let's just say, yes, I mean, renewables have scaled and they're getting better. And yes, let's 100%, let's go that direction. But CDR happened anyway. So whether or not someone has an opinion about it, someone in Kenya or Oman or the Caribbean or wherever in the world, in Asia, people are doing it anyway. Why? Because they don't want to sit around and being told that they're going to, basically live in a less prosperous, less vital world. They want to get involved. And for whatever reason, the renewable energy world wasn't as inclusive. And I don't even can't explain entirely how that is. I was thinking about how to explain this, but like here in New York, if you come up with, let's just say, a microgrid idea, or let's just say you want to do a project, the interconnect fee right now is a mystery. You don't actually know what that is. So it actually stifles innovation. That's to my understanding. Maybe they've changed it recently, but there's a lot of barriers to entry for just anyone to get involved with renewable energy. And if anyone wants to stand to correct me, please do. But in the world of CDR, there's a lot of opportunity to engage everyone, from engineers to communications people, to small scale, large scale, So that's what fascinated me, is that pretty much young people, young engineers. And also, what else is interesting about CDR, and I know you guys all know this because a lot of people are in the space, this is highly collaborative. It thinks about a lot of externalities. This industry at the get-go is considering a lot of things that prior industries never really did. Like, what was the legacy of certain ideas, right?
Yeah.
So, did I answer that?
Yeah. And you actually set up really well for, about the film. One thing I will just mention, because you brought it up too, is I think when the history is written of CDR, that just the really interesting role that COVID and the pandemic had, right?
Yeah.
You had in 2018, there was the IPCC report, global warming of 1.5, which really in the most explicit way said, okay, we have to do carbon removal. It's worse than we thought. And then you have this pandemic that rolls around 18 months later or so. And you had all these people that were sort of in these positions of really soul searching about, like, what should I do? And you had a lot of academics, I think, almost simultaneously were like, I'm doing this research, I'm writing these papers. It's not good enough. I might not be a business person, but I'm starting a company because this needs to happen in the real world. And that's pretty unique, I think, that really, in a very short period of time, it was an incredibly eclectic space that wasn't just dictated by the technical options that we have, but by kinds of people who wanted to get involved. It was really incredible.
Well, that's exactly right. And the film itself kind of follows that. It actually alludes to the pandemic, because we profile Silicate and Morris, and he talks about it was like a COVID baby, because he was sitting around reading papers, and he said, oh my God, we can remove carbon with crushed rock. And what was interesting too was that that 1.5 came out of Fiji and Tuvalu, that whole South Pacific Islands plight of the rising season, them going under at 1.5. And we start Legion with that, with the Tuvalu jacking themselves into the metaverse as a dystopic sort of harbinger of what might come. And I just also want to say that CDR, I think, cuts across party lines. And I've been talking to a lot of people who think that the climate discussion is a means of mechanism of control. Ever you mentioned COVID, that a lot of people are concerned that, because of carbon targets, it'll be just like COVID and overreach and overregulation. But I think to those people, I would say that CDR basically creates a better conversation around job creation, materials innovation, energy innovation. There's a lot of things that that will help the economy function inside the carbon cycle.
Yeah, that's well put.
That's how I see it.
Great. Well, let's get into the film itself. And I think if we could kind of just start from a high level, if you could really describe what, and a lot of stuff you just said too about like showing, I love what you said just a couple minutes ago about people are going to want to respond in a distributed way. And there's no way of kind of controlling that from any kind of central organization. And that's the big story of CDR is the level of activation and the diversity of that. And it seems like that is the kind of to me, when I see it, almost the thesis of the picture itself is to show it. But I was wondering, could you boil down first kind of what the film is about? And then if you want to set up the teaser, we'll show the teaser and then we'll come back and talk.
I mean, the hashtag for the film is The Legion is Rising. And it really is that. I want to show, or I believe we achieve that, is this spontaneous eruption of this activity around the world by young innovators who are earnest in their attempts to do this. And in the face of, they could all take other jobs, but this is a risky proposition, right? You're founding new companies. The carbon market, the removal market is nascent. There's a lot of pushback from, I think who came up with the term with paleo environmentalists. I kind of like it, but there's a lot of pushback, I've met, and I won't name names, but some of them have been traumatized by how difficult this is. So it's not this cruising easy, we're going to save the world and everything. This is science. It's large scale questions. It's obviously using renewable energy in the case of DAC, so geothermal understanding of all sorts of geologic considerations. So, what we wanted to show in this film was the earnest attempt at removing carbon at potential scale, and basically what it involves. Because I know, and we can talk about this later, but a lot of pushback. Like, I was actually just approached at a holiday party just 2 days ago where someone said, I heard that CDR involves a lot of pipelines.
Yeah, I had the same conversation yesterday with somebody else.
Yeah. So, it's like pipelines, like you're suggesting that we build a lot of pipelines. And I said, come watch the movie and we can discuss this afterward. Right.
Yeah, that is the thing about CDR. It's a sort of a blessing and a curse, is that there's so many things about it that people don't know. And that means there's so many solutions, but it means that the task of kind of educating people. So you as a filmmaker, you had to make choices. This is a very global film where you're really sort of showing it. But even there, like, you have a great balance of different companies and solutions and regions, but it must have been a difficult task to say, which one don't I include in the film?
Well, it also is at the expense of art a little bit. I mean, there were certain things that I said, I could chop 10 minutes out of this movie and it would be snappier and more fun. It's not fun. And I think we've struck the balance. I know that people are exactly strangely emoting in certain parts of the movie, which I think has to do with the fact that there is a real solution. And maybe if you've been stuck in climate depression or fear or any of these things, this is definitely a movie you should be watching. And the decisions to, keep certain information in and keep it out, make it watchable, that's all extremely difficult.
Yeah. I think that the teaser kind of speaks for itself, but is there anything you want to do to sort of set up what people are about to watch, or should I just
I think it's good.
All right, great. So let me go ahead and put it up.
We are no longer able to go beyond what we are suffering now.
It's something so uncontrollable that's eating your community up.
So we are suffering from the same problem.
We need to stop putting CO2 into the atmosphere. But once it's already in there, carbon removal is one of the few tools that directly addresses that cause of suffering.
So carbon dioxide removal is the act of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and putting it away at a time scale that is impactful for climate.
We've built direct air capture facility that actually removes carbon from the air and permanently sequesters it into concrete.
I go to work every day with 13 Kenyans who are really motivated to solving the greatest problem of our time.
Human ingenuity is something that I would bet on every single day.
Carbon removal needs to happen. It's not a question of like, can we do this? We must do this. We must find a way.
I'm a big fan of algae. I think they quite literally will save the world.
We as human beings need to be continuously searching for opportunities to solve this issue of climate change, to really try and make an impact. I think we'll succeed.
With the journey we started, it's very ambitious to do it, but we're on track.
How do we bring in industries that use energy and would give the license to develop everything as quickly as possible?
Sarcasm, sequestering it, and using it as the kryptonite for carbon.
There are policies and stakes that are being put in place of like, here's what we want to see with carbon removals.
Scientists have known that this was possible for a really long time. One of the ways to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere, which is the weathering of rocks.
So it's a win-win situation for growers.
Biochar has so many different applications. One big bag, 1.5 tons of CO2.
A nature-based solution to grow microalgae for the purpose of carbon sequestration.
We need to stop just talking about it. We need to take a real action.
If you want to go really fast, you want to go together.
We better get it right in the first place because we really don't have a second shot here.
All right. Yeah. So more of that, folks. If that, hopefully you're sufficiently teased by that. I did see the film over the summer, and then I saw it in New York for the premiere, and there was just a really great response to it. And I do want to just hear some sort of anecdotes as you were putting this together. And I was in touch with you regularly when you were still, out filming, to a degree. So I do want to hear some anecdotes from what the production was like. But just one more question on sort of the style, I guess, or approach you did. A lot of people, if you say environmental documentary or climate documentary, the first thing that'll probably come to mind, maybe after 11th Hour, but is An Inconvenient Truth, the film that Al Gore produced. I think it's probably 2005. Widely credited of really getting, global warming sort of on the map and, had a big legacy. But very, very different approach where he sort of centered it around his authority and with essentially a PowerPoint, which was kind of part of the story, where he was sort of the central truth teller. Yours is the inversion of that, where the story is being told all over the world by all sorts of different people. And that was obviously a choice, and you've kind of indicated a little bit why you made that choice. But I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about that, like why it was important for you to tell the story the way you told it.
Yeah, well, first I would say, Davis Guggenheim, who did Inconvenient Truth, is a terrific filmmaker. So there's that. And also Al is he's the former VP of the country and obviously has name recognition, and he had something to say and he did it. And Davis did a really good job helping Al tell that story. When I come from where I sit, I don't put myself in things because first of all, I'm not well known, and that's fine. And I don't intend to do that. But I find that especially when it comes to climate, well, let's just talk about carbon. It's really living inside the car. I really want to change the conversation, living inside the carbon cycle. So just like the water cycle, if you take too much water, there's no water. If you put too much carbon somewhere, it's just going to destabilize certain things. So people are doing this all over the world. So who is that one person that's going to be the voice of this? There is no one person. And if you're truthful about it, there isn't a single voice, right? And I was thinking a lot about who would be the narrator, like a more active narrator. And I don't think we're in the time of celebrity anymore in the sense because people really, I think that's really a YouTube thing. I know there are celebrities and a lot of them do some great things. But everyone is now putting themselves out there. So it's really hard to say this person is going to take you through this story. I have a really hard time with that. So I would rather make the star of the show the concept itself. It is harder as a device. Obviously, it's a lot easier to have someone just walk us through something. So that intricate layering is really hard. But I think at the end of the day, it's a good experience. And I mean, people have said that, it does attract a certain person too. I think not everyone likes that kind of storytelling, but enough do. And our theory of change is based on something that I've, learned from other people, but one particular professor, Damon Chentala out of the University of Pennsylvania, was like, did 20 years of studying the theory of change. And if you get approximately, he says 24.8% of people now, okay, let's just call it 25% of people who understand a concept, then society changes, right? So we also aren't massifying the message, right? I don't need necessarily the billions and billions of people to watch something, which would be great if it was, but if a good amount of people who have purchased on something or who would be inspired to do something sees the project, then action will happen. And we've actually seen that happen with our previous films. We actually had Urban Roots also, and We the People 2.0. We the People 2.0 was a fascinating film about nature rights, community rights that we did independently. And that has done a lot of heavy lifting all over the world around activating local communities to understand what their rights are and protect what they love. So, I mean, the inconvenient truth model of storytelling is extremely popular in terms of having a main narrator. And I think it is a very engaging way to tell stories. That said, for me, I've always said, I always like the idea more than the singular individual.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. It's an interesting thing you said about the age of celebrity is over, or at least the idea that there's these sort of centralized truth tellers that you can just sort of confer onto an audience because one person sort of said it. That's a huge liability, I think, around climate right now. And you have to show that whether it's farmers in Virginia talking about it, that it's distributed and there's a world out there that's doing it. It's not just being imposed on them from someone who has household recognition. It was also a thrill watching the video because I know some of these people. I arrived just at the beginning of the sort of wave here, and for real CDR heads, it's a real, you almost feel like you're at like a high school reunion or something, watching the film. So that was a great thrill for me. But I was wondering, this was just looking at it. You were all over the place doing the filming and the production for it, and so I didn't know whether it's sort of sharing some memorable sort of experiences from the film or some surprises, but I wonder if you could just give a little color on what it was like to actually make a film like this and over what period of time.
Well, it's a couple of things I should say, actually. As a filmmaker, I need to thank the people that helped us make the movie, our investors like Max Zeller and Benjamin Schultz and Dirk Pessler, Mark Toulouse and Alexander Woodward. And there's many more, Brandon Wallace. And also Fabian Nielsen and Paulina Villalong were young people who approached me and said, hey, would you like to do a movie on CDR? And I said, well, yeah, I was planning on, I have CDR in my portfolio already with Ice on Fire, and let's do it together. And sort of, it was a mentorship of getting, helping younger people understand the process of impact filmmaking. So the anecdotes, one of my favorite anecdotes was having not shot all the pandemic and then having a crew of basically young people, never done it before. We landed in Kenya of all places in a very dusty Hell's Gate. And I was with Harun Mahmudinovic, our fantastic cinematographer. He's Bosnian and, has a beautiful eye. And we had all these new anamorphic cameras that we were shooting super wide. So when you see the movie, it's very wide because I wanted to show these people in context. I didn't want to, again, not just zero in on the person, but I wanted to show their environment. So we use these Harun suggested this very cinematic wide format. And I think that really pays off. So the Kenya moment was, I almost thought I bit off a little more than I could chew because I hadn't done it. I was like, oh my God, okay, I got to get my location brain on. And just, there was a lot going on. It's super hot. Everyone's getting heat stroke. So, it's not easy just so everyone gets a little understanding, you're flying, you're going wherever. I'm not complaining because it's a huge honor to do this work, but you do land with a lot of pressure. You have a day or 2 days to get everything you need, and you can't mess up, right? It's like you don't have enough budget to spend 2 weeks there. You got to get it in the days that you have. So there is that, but the Maasai were really fascinating to me. Just interfacing with people who have not had a lot of, and you see it in the beginning in the teaser, that they haven't really contributed to a lot of this stuff, but they are really suffering, and they're so earnest in their interest in sort of combining with with the potential, right? So that I thought was really interesting. I also loved the collaboration between the scientists, as you said, the people that come from the universities or the tech world, and then they go to the location. Like in the case of Seafields, you have Mar and Fran, European women who now are in St. Vincent, working with the local Vincentians to figure out how to do this net, so it was those kinds of collaborations where you got this heady idea. And being someone from the city, we always sort of reside in the realm of ideas, right? These are people that have to take their ideas and actually make them happen on the ground with things, like rocks and rain and, geologic storage, which, so it's a real fascinating view into practical thinking also, not just, oh, isn't it great theoretically if we can do this? It's like, how do you actually do it when you have Maasai who've lived there for tens of thousands of years? You want to work with them. I mean, you want to put like a borehole there. How do you do that while respecting them? So to me, that was overall the theme that I saw was, this is a great idea, but how do you do, like, again, in Ireland, Morris was working with vegetable farmers, in Oman, they were way out, in the Hajar Mountains, was surrounded by, I think it was mostly goat farmers. There were wild goats, that make the pashminas, and let's see. And of course, Climeworks up in Iceland in the cold, and dealing with the sorbent materials and how low can you go and how fast can you go in those temperatures.
There's a lot there. I think one of the things, the cinematography is absolutely beautiful. That was a real triumph. It's great to see it on the big screen. I think you also made some really wise and interesting just aesthetic choices in general, like the way that you visually render some important concepts. And this subject just really does require sometimes to be able to show people something like a graph or some sort of visual representation of what it means to take a gigaton out of the sky. And even with that, you really, the way that looked, it was sort of beautiful to look at, but you could easily literally interpret what it was trying to say, where you could see you could have made a decision where I want this to look as infomercial and sciencey as you want. And you decided to not do that. And I thought that the beginning, when you started off with, was it Tuvalu? I'm blanking on the
Tuvalu. You mean the very, very beginning, the prologue?
that was just, people are like, what is going on here? Like a way to kind of get people to sort of jolt them. So anyway, I just kudos to you about kind of taking a somewhat, not obvious approach, I think, to kind of both the storytelling and the visual parts of it. I thought it
Thanks.
was really
again, it has to be a movie at the end of the day, right? And it has to be real, meaning it has to, and it also is us reflecting and responding to what's happening in the world. And also there's elements in the movie, as you mentioned, there's the motion graphics done by Sun Creature. They're amazing, which weren't super, like, we made them more on the artful side and sort of this, rather than notching all of the numbers and the gigatons and the years and all that, it was mostly, this is the general direction of what we're trying to say. And I think that helped because it was repetitive and we did that on purpose so that it sort of gave the idea of what's actually happening. And the other thing that was in the film was found footage. So the Tuvalu thing is our own footage, obviously, the big drone gorgeous footage. But intercut with the Tuvalu message about going into the metaverse, which was online, which was coming from YouTube. And we have that a couple of times in the movie where we use what I call found footage of the human response to the climate narrative, which I think has run its course. In the sense that, this idea that we're all going to die and everything's terrible and all this, and I'm part of talking about raising the alarm. But again, let's remember, I did that in 2000. Well, we started talking about 11th hour in 2005. And that's because people really weren't talking about climate. So we're like, hey, we got to talk about this. But now we have renewable, we have a lot of ways of working through living inside the carbon cycle. I think we've articulated it better. And I do think, again, we have to, work with existing infrastructure oil companies that have some of this technology that can move. Sebastian Manhart and I were talking about the Giga 10. We're doing this, we're doing a conversational version of his Giga 10. And, he's reminds us, this is a very large industry. I mean, we have to move so much material. It's much larger than Saudi Arabia's Aramco. You're asking small companies that are, just emerging young engineers, and they're like, well, can you scale to Aramco's size? I mean, there's a lot there. And so I think overall, it's really coming home to practical steps that are inclusive, not just of everyone from around the world, but also the right, the left. I mean, this is all about jobs. It's about the economy. It's about living inside the carbon cycle. That's how I see it. And I think it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into the whole, how do people see it and how do people help others see it? And then also creative ways that you and I are directly working on right in the Hudson Valley about how do we tie the film in as a way of activating local interest in very specific things. So just the first fundamental question, just about that Nisha, a regular member of our audience. So how can we watch it? But could you expand on that a little bit more and say, like, where is it being screened now? And are there any kind of key milestones of availability?
Yes.
And then we'll get it. Kevin has some excellent questions too.
Sure. So we typically have like movies. So I'm wearing two hats, the old school, not the old school, but like the media side of what is normally done media wise, and also just forget it. Let's just do everything in an innovation space media wise. So basically, normally, so we just had our premiere at New York Climate Week in September. Normally it takes like 6 months to get your release going and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to do it that way. I think I've pretty much decided that we're going to go pretty independent and doing some regional deals. But what we're going to do at the outset is first of all, we have VIP screening still. We were just in Singapore, we're in Nuremberg, we're in New York, we were in Yellow Springs, we're in Yellowknife. We are going to be in Paris, Luxembourg, London, Oman, Nairobi, and San Francisco and Stanford. So, and also MIT and also, Oxford. So we're going to have university screening tours. We're going to have university screening tours in Africa as well. We have American ones. So that's just sort of the event screenings. That's all happening, intensely in February and March and April. But we're also going to offer a rental of the film with carbon removal for the holidays. So if someone wants to watch it soon, you can remove carbon and watch the movie. And that automation is going to be on our website, hopefully later today or this week. It's a little complicated because we're actually, creating a software that can actually show movies and sell carbon certificates. So bear with us, but we're almost there. And we're going to be removing with Climeworks. We're going to be removing with Carbon Future. We're doing Global South biochar removals at different levels. We're going to be removing Octavia, Director Capture, 4401 has reached out, and also Planetary, I believe. I think so. If anyone wants to join in with that, we're pathway agnostic. We just want to have people watch the movie and remove carbon. And so there's that. And then we're going to be online like anyone else. We're going to be on the streaming platforms. The actual date, I'm not quite sure, but if you want to see it right away, you can rent it and watch it and remove carbon.
Yeah, and I don't know, Tank, if you think we can get one of these in Taiwan, it would be great.
Oh,
Tank
yeah.
is very
To interrupt, yeah, and we will happily bring the film to a theater near you. So what we can do is we rent local theaters, and we're gonna do this with Chris in the Hudson Valley, and also actually in, I think, Denver, we decided, in Austin. So if anyone is in a town, we're happy to come show the movie. You can bring the policy people, the university people, whatever. And on our website, you can go to the join. Inside there, you can say, I want to bring it to my town. And if I wanted to organize.
Yeah, Kevin he prefaced that with an earlier question. Kevin, I'll be in touch with you. I think Minnesota, where you're based, is actually a really interesting and overlooked possible place.
Well,
for
let's
you
go there. We can happily go there.
Yeah, I love the idea too. So Tank did organize or participated in an event for, what was it, for corporates and some policymakers. I don't know if it was in Taipei or in your town. So we should definitely put that on the list, right, Tank? See if we can get it in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think Kevin was talking about how important it is for local and states to be focused on CDR, not just sort of national, international. And Kevin, that is absolutely what Open Air is focused on. So I'll shoot you an email and maybe we can talk about Minnesota. But what he said here and what you just said, Leila, I love this idea of the sort of the house party that could be organized if you have Kevin's out there or Nisha's out there or members of Open Air or Air Miners that want to get people together in a room to watch this with an eye towards mobilization, which that's what we're doing in Albany, right? That's to try to get people engaged specifically in political advocacy. In Luxembourg also will have an element of that too. But yeah, let's talk through that a little bit in terms of Kevin's question. Yeah.
Well, a shout out to Max Pisciata, who is our CDR consultant on Legion 44 from the very beginning, and now is helping with the automations of this, as well as also, bringing on information on CDR. And he's actually going to be writing the discussion guide for the house parties, and also the curriculum. That it's not so much curriculum, but it's like, an educational package that we can send to the universities or the high schools so they can watch the movie, probably a cut down version of it, and to have a discussion guide. So with the house parties, what we usually send is like a poster, the discussion guide, and then a copy of the movie where you can stream it for your friends and have a conversation. And I think even we're going to, and we did this before early in the day with 11th Hours, I created a map. And if a group of people or anyone decided that they were going to do something in the space, they declared it and showed it so that we can show the impact map, because impact is always very difficult to show. And I have anecdotes all day long about what's happened with our films and who did what because they saw it. But it's just super nice to show it. And now we have the tools really now to show what people are doing. So we'll have that on legion44.world. I put the URL in the chat. That's where everything Legion you can find, and which will include, ability to request it to come to your town. And it just depends on, the costs are variable depending on what kind of event you want to have, whether it's a house party or if it's going to be in the local theater, will help you do that. And whether or not you want some of the experts to come, because the experts are all over the world. So, we can certainly have someone come and have a Q&A afterwards. So it's really, we haven't shrunk wrapped the whole thing yet. It's early days.
What we'll do, Leila, is we each week on this show, we'll give an update as this sort of progresses in the beginning. But absolutely, as we discussed before, count us in when it comes to, I love the idea of the house party idea that could be done, in the mid-spring. Yeah. And it could be tied in with other initiatives that we're doing. Like we're trying to introduce 2 bills in New York State that are CDR related. I want to use the film as the sort of the charismatic rocket that kind of gets it into people's heads in terms of what we're talking about. And, I'm actively working with Austin and in Denver, but to have other people, Kevin in Minnesota. And I think there's advantages to a theatrical release where, you find those local subject experts or companies. Let's say if you did it in Minneapolis, you've got Carba is there. You got people at the University of Minnesota. you could really make a moment out of it, but you could, in a pretty mobile way for activists, you could do something with like a house party at your house. You know what I mean? So we want to be trying to really project those possibilities and guide people, work with you very closely on that, at Open Air, and to really, get as many people watching this as possible. I think Nisha, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we should do a policy tour, like you said. Like, I think we should, for theaters, we should do where you think policy is breaking or it would break if we, I think that's
I mean, Luxembourg is an interesting, we just wrapped up for 3 years, we've been working on Luxembourg, seeing possible CDR leadership there. And we just developed a really pretty amazing, very detailed policy proposal that we're now trying to inject. But you're going to be showing in Luxembourg, and we have an understanding that very high level people are going to be there. And so can we use that as the thing that draws people, creates the frame of reference for them, but then we talk specifically about what does this look like in Luxembourg? You know what I mean? That's the way I sort of look at it. Nisha did ask a question, not surprising. She's one of the blockheads about low carbon cement in the film or concrete. We had Silicate, right? And Heirloom are 2 CDR companies that overlap with concrete. Both carbonation technologies and DAC technologies. So something there for everybody. Nisha also asked about the future of possible, sort of streaming hosting on Netflix, Flex, or Prime.
Yes.
That's a later decision, but that's probably
happening. That's happening, but later. Like, I'm not sure. I'm trying to manage the new windows, and I'm actually talking to the distributor about which of those platforms makes most sense. Maybe Amazon Prime, probably looking like, but it's still open. And again, because we want people to remove carbon too. So it's like, how do you, make that happen and keep that vision in place, So
yeah, and you also, the idea of pairing, we at Open Air are mobilizing around trying to get localities to buy small amounts of carbon removal under the umbrella of the DOE program, or even independently. Tank and I have been talking about that as well. But if you did a screening where, people put a certain amount of money in, could you create like a little chunk of change that then, in, just to take Minneapolis, here's a map that shows, whether it was government or a group of 30 citizens, raised $5,000 to buy carbon removal and filling. There's just so many opportunities to use this.
Exactly where, and I have to do shout out to Dirk Pessler for this. He said, really, anyone who watches should remove carbon. And I think that's how we're going to lean in. And I think we should. I think we should do policy screenings or city screenings and actually get a commitment. The beautifully restored theater. Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm just putting that up there because here's an idea that's coming from one of our audience members. So I have your email, Kevin, from the registration. If it's okay with you, it'd be fun. I'll just email you, maybe even copy Leila or another member of Leila's team, because we are looking for where the best places to kind of really focus, and having some boots on the ground is a really, really important element of that.
Yeah. And a shout out to Jacob Cox too, who's helping me with the website. And, we are, and Holden might be starting, to cut a lot of we're going to have a lot of ancillary content, full length interviews, cut downs, because obviously not everything's in the movie, and a continued conversation around this, because this is a living, breathing, and very fast moving space. We're going to, so there's going to be a lot there. I'm excited about it. And I love everyone in the space. Has been lovely to work with. And like I said, I was inspired by it back in early 2000. So I am so happy to see that it's here and vital. And
it is such a great industry too, which totally contrasts with a lot of people's sometimes lazy or dug in assumptions that this is all coming from some annoying tech bros or the oil company.
Yeah.
You meet the people that are doing it and why they're doing it. I loved my solar background. I loved the contractors. I love the people. But this is just different. There's just so many interesting, their motivations are so in the right place, and you really do give a tribute, I think, to that in the film, which is great. So anyway, I want to congratulate you, Leila. We obviously talk regularly and are going to talk again very soon. But you've done the world and our industry and movement a gigantic service with this film. So we are going to do whatever we can to get as many people as possible to watch it, but really, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last couple of years. So kudos to you.
I look forward to working with you all, people I can't see, but and you, Open Air, to do this together. This is something that I said, it's a love letter to humanity, that my love letter, because I see so much of what I see so much of the heart in this space. And so everyone should join in. They're not all tech bros or oil company. And that's what we have. This is CDR, you know, in our place, I go, this is Claire Nelson, like this is Duncan Kariuki. This is who they are. And it's not who.
Yeah, you humanize it, which is, that's why we ask that first question every week at the theater. Who are you? Because that's a huge part. Yeah, it's what you know, and whatever that cliche expression is. But thanks so much, Leila. We'll talk very soon. So just in the last 30 seconds here, I wanted to give people some heads up on what's coming up. We have our last, this is someone who Leila knows very well, who's actually in the film, Dr. Hannes Junginger from Carbon Future. Amazing company in the certification, verification, and carbon dioxide removal credit market. Not only can Hannes tell us about the company, but his point of view on the complexities of carbon markets and verification. It'll be quite an education, and he's really one of the top thinkers and doers in the world on this subject. So that is next Tuesday. Please join us for that. That's our last before the holiday. But then following that, we will have, we're booked all the way up, I think, through the end of February. We got some amazing things that we'll let you know about on our Luma. Those of you, again, who are in New York, Tank, if you could throw that link in there just in the last minute here. Next Monday, we have an amazing, very much carbon removal focused showcase we're doing in New York City on Roosevelt Island. So if you're in town and interested in this, please do join us. So with that, I will bid everybody adieu. And again, thanks for joining us. See you, everybody.
Bye.